Cuba is facing renewed threats from Washington. American President Donald Trump is pushing the Cuban government to the breaking point. The communist establishment at the heart of the Caribbean has been a point of frustration for Washington for the last 6 decades. And once again, the United States is gradually raising the heat on Cuba. Trump has issued an ultimatum. Cuba must make a deal before it is too late. This ultimatum does not have any deadline, and it also lacks a clear outline about what type of deal Trump wants from Havana. Earlier, the U.S. president reposted a message that jokingly suggested that U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, who is the child of Cuban immigrants, could also become the president of Cuba. Threats from Washington have drawn an angry retort from Havana. President Miguel Díaz-Canel has said that no one would tell his country what to do. In fact, Díaz-Canel added that Cuba is ready to defend the homeland to the last drop of blood. The renewed tensions come after the capture of Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro. According to Trump, Maduro provided Cuba with oil, while Cuba gave him manpower. Trump says Maduro's capture has severed the link between Caracas and Havana. With the U.S. exercising an oil blockade over Venezuela, Trump believes that Maduro's ouster leaves Cuba ready to fall. These fresh tensions between Washington and Havana revive memories of an old crisis. The origin of the tumultuous relationship dates back to the 1960s. That was when communist revolutionary Fidel Castro and Che Guevara overthrew dictator Fulgencio Batista in Cuba and established a communist government. This was the time when a war of ideological dominance was underway between U.S. and Soviet Union. Cuba's proximity to America left Washington worried, and it led to a covert U.S. operation in 1961. In fact, Cuba was close to the Soviet Union, and under Operation Bay of Pigs, U.S.-backed Cuban exiles attempted to overthrow Fidel Castro. But the operation resulted in a humiliating defeat for the Americans, and a year later came the infamous Cuban Missile Crisis. The U.S. imposed a naval blockade on Cuba under John F. Kennedy, and this is when Cuba became the battleground of a superpower showdown. The world came ever closer to a full-blown nuclear war at this time. The crisis ended after the U.S. promised not to invade Cuba in return for the withdrawal of Soviet nuclear missiles from the island nation. Since then, both the U.S. and Cuba have continued to have hostile relations. A Cold War-era U.S. trade embargo continues to rattle Cuba's economy. With Maduro gone, Havana is once again in Washington's crosshairs, marking the rebirth of a half-a-century-old crisis.